Wow. Wonderful, wonderful experience. Our last one today is my other best friend, Theron Muller, who's a very, very integral member of our MASH group. He's pretty much created the website for us, and I've learned over the past couple of years collaborating, there are only two things to say about Theron. I'm going to screw this up now. There are only the things that he knows how to do and the things that he just doesn't know yet. Because in 2 or 3 years of collaborating, there hasn't been anything that he hasn't done quickly, brilliantly, and wonderfully. So let's hear it for Theron Muller.
So Steve and I have been working on this event for upwards of a year now, and for, I think, the entire year I've said, if you need me to do something, let me know. If you need me to do something, let me know. And so he comes back on Friday and he says, so Theron, you're on. And so I had about as much time as I had to finish about my theme to think about what exactly I was going to do. And I decided what I was going to talk about was my study of Korean, which I started in April. And the first question is why? I've been here for 10 years. And why would I start studying Korean? Because I'm entrenched in Japan, basically. I'm not going to be going to Korea. But it's always been advised in all these books I read about teaching that teachers should study a language in order to understand the whole process that learners go through. And so when I started it with our Korean teacher and my business partner, our 2 students and the teacher in the room, I immediately ran into a bunch of assumptions the teacher had about us and about our motivations toward the language and us as students. And a caveat, this is all skewed to my perspective. I haven't talked to her about this and about her impressions as a teacher. So one of the things that I got right away was that she feels the need, and the course book reinforces this, I need to know how to read to speak. The first 20 pages are all the phonetics of the Korean language, and it's a phonetically written language. So the first 20 pages just go into the details about how to read it. And the first 3 pages are the general rules. And then the next 17 are all of the exceptions. So when there's this pronunciation of a word following, then you don't pronounce this. And the assumption is that I care, that I really care about the exceptions to the rules, and that I'm even going to attempt to remember them. And another assumption is that I care what the language standards are. She says, oh, well, people come to university and study in Korea, and they write it this way, and it's wrong. When am I going to be going to university in Korea? There we go. And then another thing, like I said, is that the spelling standards for the language actually bother me. Like, I really care about how to spell. I really feel for my students now because, you know, they can write the words in katakana, right? It's like, no, you got to write it in English. They're like, why? Katakana is just fine. I understand now how they're feeling. Because when I'm in the classroom and she's writing on the board, it's like, it'd be so much easier to just write that down in English. And I mean, the big issue is I don't look Korean, nor do I look Japanese, right? And I'm not going to be looking Korean anytime soon, nor am I going to be looking Japanese anytime soon. So I'm always going to be a second language speaker of Korean. And then finally, there's an assumption she has about my access to the language. She goes off the assumption that she's the person mediating my access to Korean, and that the textbook is mediating my access to Korean. But I'm not stupid, I'm on smart.fm. I mean, that's how I learned how to read it, right? I show up at the second lesson and I can actually read some of the stuff that we've been studying. And she says, oh, wow, that's really impressive. You remember everything from last week. No, I actually went and found an experience. I went and found a place. So what I want to talk about is, I mean, I went into this to get the experience as a teacher, right? So how can my experience as a student of Korean influence my classroom when I'm teaching my students? One thing that I realized was thinking time. Often in the Korean class, the teacher will say, okay, Theron sensei, please read number 1. And then I just repeat after her. There's no time for me to figure it out. It's like, please read. And if I don't read right away, she says it for me. So now she'll say, please read, and I just wait. Then there's the other issue of when do I repeat? Because she's always reading the stuff that's in the book. Because she can read it, right? She's Korean, so she's going through the book. And she's reading it, and she'll read number 1. And I know she's reading number PowerPoint because I can read it too. The question is, am I supposed to say that or not? And then another thing is, we just had this last week Thursday. We went through and we did substitution, vocabulary substitution exercises. And when she closed the book, she said, "Ja, kono peiji wa issho desu." And I was like, what? I don't understand a word of this. And I think that one of the issues for me as a student is I really do want to succeed, however you define success. I'm not going to go to Korea and have a conversation with somebody in a cafe in Korean. But what I'd like to do is to be able to accomplish the tasks that I'm expected to in the classroom. Whatever those tasks may be, I want to be able to do them. I don't want her to prove to me that she can read Korean, because I already know she can read Korean. But it's really hard to be successful because there hasn't been a framework established for me. It's for me to build, and I'm a teacher. So if anybody should be able to build the framework, it should be me, right? I should be able to understand what I need to do in order to learn it. But it's still really difficult for me to go through and figure those things out. Did that just come off?
Yep.
Oh, I don't know what I want to say. This isn't the last one though. So these are lessons for me in my classroom, basically. Don't assume that you're the only person giving your students access to the language. Because that's one thing that I learned is I'm accessing the language. My teacher isn't able to see all the things that I'm doing with the language. So that's one point. And another point is, as a student, sometimes we want those boring drills. I mean, I want to learn the vocabulary. We're doing the little vocabulary substitution exercises, and we're moving from 1 to 8. And I don't know 1, and we're down at 7. And I'm still looking at 1, trying to figure it out. While she's at 7, trying to get me to read number 7. But I don't want to just sit there in class for an hour doing audiolingual kind of repeats. I mean, like Scott said, the teachers just don't have the energy to do it, right? But what I want to do is interesting things. I mean, when I go in there, I think of my kids' lessons where I show up with vocabulary cards and we'll do like a memory game or something so that they learn to read the words. And then the last observation is that people change. The mantle of the classroom changes people. It's like Scott said about standing out in the hallway, smoking cigarettes. Everybody's chatting it up, and then you get into the classroom. And the teacher is the teacher, and the student is the student, and nobody's having any fun anymore. Thank you very much.